Greetings. This is a walkthrough slash tip video um, that will help you with your first lab in CIS 2610 Android programming. I am just going to use the example from the book this time, and remember the author doesn't do everything exactly as we plan or as we talk about. But I'd like to show you a few things, and these are basically reiterations of what has been discussed in class. First off, remember the video, we have the simple salsa, where we basically have the screen, and we click View Recipe, and we see the recipe. Now, for your lab, and we'll rely on the back button to get back. For your lab, you'll have two items on the main activity screen, and depending on which button, there will be of course be two buttons, two images. We'll go to a different screen. We won't worry about getting back to the main screen for now, except by using the emulator back button. Okay, let's return back to Eclipse, and I've already imported the package within here and opened up some of the items to look at. First off, few things to note. In our Java source, and remember this will not be net.androidbootcamp.healthyrecipes. This will be edu.classid.lab1. But we have our main.java and our recipe.java. So we will have two Java files. In the resources, under our drawable HDPI, we will have brought in, she has one image. You will have brought in more than one image depending on your layout, because you will need images for all of your activities. Remember, an activity is a page. Same thing up here for the Java. You will have one more Java page simply because you'll have two separate pages apart from the main page. You'll have a main or an activity main, and then two pages other than just a simple recipe one. But let's talk all about these items here. And of course you will have an Android manifest as well too, and I'd like to look at each of these as we go through. Let's first open up the main page, and here we have our design. We've talked about design already. We have an image this time, we have a button, and of course we have a text view. Now, so three items on this example. Remember, for the lab you'll have two separate areas. It'll be up to you to design that. I would definitely recommend starting off with a relative layout and using our simple buttons and text views. Um, Now the image, of course, remember we have more places we can go here, and this would be the images and media, and we have our simple image view here. Now, a couple things to note over here on the outlines. First off, there are a lot of warning that will pop up, and this is because in the example she does not use the object references such as the string reference, or a button reference or an image reference. Remember, we have reference files that we would use, such as the strings.xml, and we've talked about that. She does not do that. It doesn't stop things from working, but we want to use the correct approach. So instead of text view 1 simple salsa, we would probably call this perhaps text view recipe, uh, or such there, or recipe text view would be better. But in our text area, instead of typing simple salsa, remember we would make a string reference, and we have talked about this before. So make sure you would do your ellipses, create your string reference, and that would end up then in the strings.xml file. Remember, you have it defaults to the just regular list, but we can actually look. So you'll have a lot more in here than she would. So let's go back to the main. We have a simple layout, and we have a button. There's no comments in here, but remember, of course, we do place our comments in between elements. In between elements. So you notice there's even pieces missing along here that are because of the ways that she has done the text. And so these are informational warnings. They're not the red X's as we're used to, but they're informational warnings. Um, your line number should be on by default. If not, just place your cursor where there are line numbers and right click and make sure that's checked for line numbers. That will help you immensely. Okay. Um, Now, so that's the main page with the graphical layout. The recipe page, let me open that up, is used all text views. And notice it's hard to know what text view is what. So this is why we use the Hungarian notation to tell us which one is which. Once again, instead of using the string references, she has just typed them in here. So you will have a string reference for each one of these. So your strings.xml file is going to be much larger than hers is, because each one of these will be a string reference. Now, of course, we can look at the XML file, and once again, we have our um, problems with the text names and so on, and how that works. Okay, so those are issues to be aware of when looking at this code. Hopefully this is large enough. If not, we can right click and go to Preferences under General, Appearance, Colors, and Fonts. And we can go ahead and edit and make it, I'll make it 11, just a little bigger, and hit OK. And now it's a bit bigger. So if it's not large enough for you on the system you're working with, remember that's under Preferences, General, Appearance, Colors, and Fonts, and then you can hit Edit, and with text font selected, and there's plenty of items here. I wouldn't recommend changing a ton of them and make that bigger. I'll keep that at 11 for now. Alright, so we have our XML files. We have our image file. Remember, you're going to drag PNG files into the drawable HDPI. Make sure you copy them in. Don't do references, but copy them in so they are with your application. Let's look at the Android manifest here for a moment here. There are a lot more tabs underneath here, and we're going to talk about this yet in class. But notice the Android manifest has to tell the application what all it needs. Okay, so we have such as a drawable icon, but by default it knows to start with the main in the launcher, the main file. We would need to add, of course, the recipe file, and this one, and yours, you also need to add a third reference because it needs to know all of the activities that are required. This one has a minimum SDK version that it uses, and so that can be set in there as well as in many of our permissions and our manifest areas and whatnot. I tend to use the XML file a lot, but the manifest file can really help quite a bit. We click on the Uses SDK. It says minimum version 10. We're actually, our target SDK version, we might browse and find another level, or just simply type that in, depending on the API we're using. And remember, by default, we're using Android 4.0.3. So let me close out some of this here, and that's fairly simple. I want to keep our main. Let me pull our main back while we're here. Now we have a button, and notice it's called Button Recipe. That's important. Boy, that name, and that's its ID. Button Recipe. Very important, folks. This is where the ID becomes so important. Let me first go to the recipe.java file. First off, our package name will be placed here automatically. So yours will be your edu.classid.lab1, right? As we create this, because this is all part of one package. Um, some of the imports will happen automatically, usually as you need them, like activity and bundle, and we'll talk more about those. A lot of times when you start to type code, Eclipse will actually suggest, you recommend that you should import another Android class, basically. But this is a very simple, the most simplest set of Java that we'll get here. Okay, and some of the pieces here, we say public class recipe extends activity. Well, our activities are our main activity that we've started with, so it's part of the activity. And the book goes through typing and using the completion, because Eclipse will help you with some completion there. Okay, it will do stubs to tell you, hey, you need to probably put something there. Um, so public class, so it can see each other. On create, we're always going to use on create. Bundle, we'll talk more about bundles, but bundles is everything that's included on that activity page. Because as we move into deeper and deeper into our programs, we'll have more and more widgets, which more and more data, and we need a way to move that stuff. Okay, so saved instance state, that'll also become much more important. Most of this is generated automatically for us, but activity pages need to remember between switching back and forth as to what's on them. All of our information is static right now, but as we start adding variables and user input, we'll want to be able to save that so we can use it and write it somewhere. We'll talk more about the super, but on recreate, it pulls in that saved instance state. In this case, in this bundle, it's a bunch of text views, right, for the recipe. We may also have some images. We don't have to worry about making sure we account for every single thing, though, because the bundle by default uh, pulls all that together for us. So that's very nice about Android. So on create saved instance state, we set our context view, which is what the user will see. And we use R, which stands for resource. And you can get some, when you highlight it a little bit, get some more information. Layout.recipe. Well, what's recipe? Well, if you remember, the recipe XML file is just that, right? It's called recipe.xml. It's created as an activity, and we're able to, the recipe is the layout. We're able to load the recipe.java. Got a little ahead of myself. Recipe is how the Java file is then uh, contained in its object, r.layout.recipe, because that is what we have called it. We've made it the class recipe, and it loads the recipe file, not XML file. Okay, sorry to confuse you a little bit there for a second there. Now, so that's all there is. Now let's look at for the recipe file. Now the main file, if we remember, is where all our action occurs, because we got this button, and that's causing our second activity to load. So there's a little bit more here. That's why I did the recipe first. So let's go to main.java. Now first off, we still have the same package. We have a bit more imports, okay? And a lot of these will happen by default on the main class, all right? Some of them won't. We put the button on and whatnot. These will be suggested depending on when we do it, sometimes even put in, right? But we will have the view and the bundle and the intent and so on. We still have main extends activity, because activity is our main item here. Okay, same stuff here. On create, button, saved instance state. Now, notice our curly braces. Those will become your friend and foe, right? We on create instance state, we set our view, and in this case, we're doing the main because that's what loads up first. Now, here's some new stuff. I'm going to add a little space here. We have to create a button object in Java. Okay, just because we created a button in the XML file, we have to link these two together. And this, let me say this again. We have to link these two together. So we create a button object, right? instantiated from the button class. So our object is B. We could have come up with a better name, but that's sort of how we do it in Android. So button, find view by ID. You will use this a lot. What ID? Well, in our R we have an ID called button recipe. Button recipe? What ID is button recipe? Well, if we look back on the main page and we click on this button here for view recipe, look here, my friends, the ID is button recipe. BTN, capital R, and then so on, right? So back to my main.java, look at that. It's the same. We have with this line here, line 18, we've declared a button object. We've instantiated it from the button class. Capital B-U-T-T-O-N is class. We've instantiated a button object. And then we've linked it to the button on our main activity page. It's a beautiful thing. We'll do it a lot. The first time you do it, a little difficult, but you'll do it over and over and it'll become a habit. Okay? Now, that's great. Now, look on line 19, though. We have that button, and it's there, and it's linked. But now we have to say, hey, we got to sort of set this button up and be ready to wait for somebody to click on it. And this is where we have this on-click listener method, right? When they click on it, all right, we create a new on-click listener. And then we have to say, what do you want me to do when they click on it? Well, for now, we don't want them to do a lot. We want them to switch activities and show the recipe. So, we have inside our click listener, when we create our new click listener, please, curly braces, are your friend or foe, right? Eclipse will help. What do? Well, on click, view, V, this is pretty standard, view V, we're instantiating again. We do what? We start an activity with a new intent. We'll talk a lot about intents. For now, the intent is simply to create a new to move to a new activity, right? From the main, where we are, this is a pointer in objects, which object we're sort of pointing at right now. So from the main, we're going to load up the recipe class. So what's this basically saying? When we click the button, we are going to start an activity that opens up the recipe class Java file. Okay. So the recipe class Java file, which we have, opens up. And what's the recipe class Java file do? It pulls in the recipe.xml layout. Okay, so we created the layouts, but it's the Java files that are doing the work. Not only to load the layout on create, on both of them, on create, okay. So the Java files are not only what XML file to load for our layout, what activity basically, right? They also perform actions. So our main one says load that main, show it to us, but we also got this button, and we click this button, go from the main, load the Java for recipe.java, and recipe.java say, hey, okay, my turn. What am I going to do? When I'm created, I'm going to set my view to the recipe.xml file layout. It's a simple process. It takes a little while, though, to get used to it. We will do this multiple times throughout the semester. So please watch this video, rewatch this video. We're going to talk about this in class. But this is a key concept. Thank you. Thank you so much.